up, everybody? So I thought I'd make a very quick video here about an exotic piece of hardware that I have here, which I am going to be selling off. This is something I do very, very rarely, but originally, many years back, I think it was back in 2011 or 12-ish, I was relatively new to the like retro gaming, so and I had a lot of money. So one of the things that annoyed me about going back to the Famicom or the NES was the video quality that you could get from the machine. And yeah, composite just wasn't good enough for me. So after doing some extensive research, I realized that there is a single official hardware revision of the Famicom that is equipped with something very neat, and that is an S-video out, as you can see. And that strange oddity out of straight out of 1980s bubble economy Japan is this weird piece of hardware here by Sharp, of all things. I know this is not a Japanese PC, and that's really what my channel is focused about, but it is from Sharp. So and that's the strange thing about the Famicom, is that even though it was a Nintendo console, Nintendo did allow some third parties to actually make their own revisions of the Famicom. So and this was not the only one made by Sharp. They also made some other revisions, like with the disk system built in and stuff like that. But this is the coolest one of them all, and the strangest. So it's called the Famicom Titler, or the AN-510, and it's a combination Famicom and a titler machine. And a titler is a device that you could use to create put text on video. Yeah, so you could superimpose text on a video source. So it's a very strange and niche thing. I don't know why the Japanese needed something like that, but apparently they did, and Sharp built one. So let's have a look at how this thing kind of works. I don't really know much about the titler functionality of it. I only ever used it for the Famicom playback functionality, but apparently you can do a whole bunch of stuff with this thing. And the reason why I'm selling it off is because, well, not long after I bought this, a very neat RGB solution came out that allowed you to modify any revision of the NES or Famicom with an RGB output. And because this thing is huge, look at the size here compared to the controllers, for example, and I don't really like really big bulky hardware, especially when it comes to consoles. This thing, I don't need the titler functionality. All I need is for playing Famicom games. So I just bought an heavy Famicom and I modified it, and that's what I'm using. I've been using since, and this thing has just been lying in its package. So I thought, why not sell it off and use the money to buy some other exotic Japanese hardware. So let's have a look at the manual here for a little diagram showing how you would typically use this device. You see you have a camcorder hooked up, and then a VCR, and then the television. So the idea is you would feed a video input into this. You would manipulate it using the functionalities of superimposing text and graphics onto the video feed, and then you would output that to a VCR and record it. And yeah, God knows why you would do that. I mean, one idea I've heard of is you could create custom video greetings, put text, they could be holiday themed and stuff like that. There's functionality like this. So as you can see, one thing this thing has is a now this is a little bit cracked, but usually this is a actually a touch pen surface, and you would use a pen to manipulate things in the software. And as you can see, like the stuff relevant for the Famicom side are just these three things here and over here. So when you want to play a Famicom game, you just put it into game mode here, and you turn it down. This is the reset, and this is for ejecting the cartridge, and that's it. The rest of all this stuff is to be used for the Titler functionality. So let's have a look at the back side here. As you can see, there is an S-video output and an input, RF, sound and video, just composite input and output as well. Then we have some controls here on the side where you can switch things over from on off to like this is input, this is off. I'm not really sure what this is to be used for. We have some knobs. This is a mixer. So what's this say? Computer. Yeah, not sure here. One thing to note here is that if you want to use the Titler functionality, you have to push this up, and this actually blocks the cartridge slot. So basically, this thing is a Titler and a Famicom, two different devices in one, and you can't use both at the same time. So once you switch this over to the Titler functionality mode, the Famicom mode just is turned off. You can't use that anymore. So the two different things that this can do are not really integrated at all, seemingly. And yeah, I guess you can see that as well if you open it up and look at the boards inside. I think I've saw someone that do that once. Like there's a Famicom board here, and then there's a Titler board here, and they don't really do much together at all. As far as yeah, so this is just typical Famicom. It don't even has the extra controller input here. As you can see, the controllers are actually just like the original Famicom. They are wired to the machine, and actually they are very short. You see, this is the length you get. Ridiculous, like the Famicom itself. But you could use an extra controller here, or this could also be used for various other things like the zapper and stuff like that. Anywho, so let's turn this thing on and see what it does when you switch it over to the Famicom mode here. I mean to the Titler mode, because if you switch it over to the Famicom mode, all it is just a Famicom. You play the games just like a Famicom, just like you would on a Famicom, except you have the advantage of having S-video out. And actually, when talking about like getting video quality out of a Famicom that is higher than a composite, that is a very, very complicated thing, actually, a subject, because the way the Famicom hardware is built is unlike most other consoles. Most other consoles, when they generate the video signal, they actually generate an RGB signal, and then internally that RGB signal will be converted into whatever it is going to be output. Sometimes you get RGB out directly, like you can on the Master System or Mega Drive, but some other systems don't give you the RGB out. They just convert it into composite and just give you that, like the PC Engine. But the Famicom was special in that the video chip actually generates a composite signal. There's no RGB ever internally. And in fact, because the way old games work is that they have a limited palette of colors. And the game programs, what they when they want to like color a pixel in like a sprite or a tile, they say like, I want this pixel to be this color, color number 4, and then the hardware would know what that color is. And the strange thing about the Famicom is that those colors are actually not stored as an RGB value. So when you want to like add RGB functionality to a Famicom, you actually don't really know what the exact color value of like a composite color is. There's a lot of ambiguity there, and because of that, there are like people, hundreds of different or dozens of different RGB palettes have been created for the NES or Famicom. Mainly, to begin with, they were made for emulators because they will operate in the RGB space. And later, when the different boards came along, they allowed like they also had to have their own interpretation. So the one I'm using by Tim, it actually comes preset with 3 different palettes that you can switch between, and I just choose the natural one and just force it to be that always. I don't want to switch between. And the one in here, the way this actually generates a better signal than composite is it uses a chip that actually has RGB capability, and those were used in like Nintendo arcade games. Okay, so Nintendo had these Versus machines and various other arcade machines based on the Famicom hardware, and because arcades are RGB based, they actually made these chips, these video chips that actually had RGB values. But those RGB values inside of that were kind of like a little bit screwy. So actually with some games that you play on this, the colors will be way off. Like some games will even be unplayable because this one uses the arcade palette, and the arcade palette was made for various arcade games, so it would work perfectly with those arcade games, but it wasn't made so that it would work with any Famicom game, because that was not the intent of the arcade hardware. But this uses a chip from that, so you know, they didn't really put too much work into it. Like, it's a little bit, but it's a good piece of hardware anyway. It's very rare, as I said. If you want one of these, it's gonna set you back like a fortune. And why would you even want that? Like, I wanted one because at the time, getting this was the best solution for getting the best video quality out of this thing. Back then, there were some people like taking those RGB chips out of Nintendo arcade boards and then trying to modify actual Famicoms or NESs with those, and it was a kind of a crapshoot. Nobody really knew how to do it properly. That there were some graphical artifacts like jail bars and stuff like that. I didn't want to mess with any of that. When I found out there was an actual official hardware revision that could do that, I said that's what I want, and I bought this, and now I don't need it anymore. So let's have a look at the title functionality of this before I sell it off and never be able to do that again. Okay, so let's turn this thing on. And the first thing you'll notice is, well, there's a startup screen with some graphics. And if we leave it alone for a little bit, it's going to start cycling through the different kinds of graphics available to superimpose on top of texts. Now these seem to be like holiday themed, Japanese holidays obviously. I'm not too familiar with the different days of significance in Japan, but these seem to be the most important ones, or the ones they've chosen to feature. And you can see a date here, so this machine is kind of dating itself. It's probably from 1989. I have to confirm this. The way you actually control the titler functionality is through the Famicom controller actually. So here, to begin with, we have a little bit of a menu. Unfortunately, I haven't really gone through these to see what everything does. Nope. Nope. Okay, so this one is for text input. And here you actually use the touch pen interface. If you notice down in the corner there, when I write something here, it kind of registers it and it tries to like interpret what kind of Japanese character I put in there. Now unfortunately my touch pen is a little bit cracked and I'm not too keen on using it too much because well, this is not my machine anymore, it's been sold to a seller. So we're going to leave that alone. But basically, you, if you know what you're doing, you're going to be able to input text here. And then, probably using some sort of functionality, you're going to be able to superimpose this text on top of a video or make it a part of one of those graphics. I'm not entirely sure. Now, if we go to the second menu, and press the start here. Now I can touch the various buttons on the machine itself to select the various themes that are available. Takes me back to the menu. And here you can actually draw some graphics, some custom graphics using a whopping 3 colors apparently. Yeah. So I'm not actually sure whether all this functionality that you see here, whether that is based on some custom hardware or whether they're actually using the Famicom hardware to do all this graphics and menus. It would kind of make sense if they are actually using the Famicom to do this. Then it makes sense for them to have a Famicom inside of this, because then they have kind of a cheap hardware that is capable of doing you know, for the era, kind of advanced graphics, at least adequate for the kind of things you want to do here. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense that this machine was ever even built. Otherwise, not so much. Why put a Famicom inside a titler machine? If you're wondering what a titler machine is, basically, there were a lot of these made in 1980s Japan. And what they do is basically what you saw before. You see all this text, all this black area here that you see? This would become transparent once you use once you insert a video feed into this machine, and you would have only the graphics on top of it. And what you could do with that is, like, you could kind of spice up your home videos and stuff like that. Like, for example, if you have a video taken on one of these holidays, you could create a title, like a beginning for it. This is like basic stuff that anyone can do on their phone right now. Like stuff like this, like video editing and stuff like that is built in. And even in the 90s, camcorders started having functionalities like this built in. But in the 1980s, you basically needed a separate device to do stuff like this. And that's where titler machines came in. There actually apparently was a market for this, because if you go on Yahoo Auctions and search for titler, you will find several machines that do stuff kind of like this. So apparently there was a market for it. And in that sense, I guess it kind of made a little bit sense for Sharp to do this, especially if they could, like as I said, take advantage of the graphical functionality of the Famicom. So maybe all this titler functionality is actually just a Famicom ROM that once you put it into titler mode, it just boots that. Of course, they would need some other neat hardware as well in order to be able to like superimpose this stuff on top of video feed, some video input functionality. And since this thing actually supports S-video, which is really like a big deal for the 80s, but very few things supported S-video back then. This is actually a very advanced piece of kit for the time, and I'm sure it was priced accordingly. I'm sure this cost a fortune, and I'm not sure what wealthy dad would buy something like this in order to manipulate his home videos and then let his child play his Famicom games on it. But apparently someone at Sharp thought that this was a possibility, and so this product came into being. But it was not a huge hit, as you may imagine. So these things are very, very rare, and you know, the way it is with the collector's market, these things go for a yeah, they demand a pretty high premium. So I would not recommend that you buy this.